I'm making this video because at the age of 47, I was diagnosed after a lifetime of struggling with being forgetful and being able to focus and being able to finish tasks. At the age of 47, I was diagnosed with ADD. And it was a diagnosis that was life-changing because I finally had a name to explain something that I had been struggling with since I was a little girl. Now, if you're a woman, 25 plus, or you have somebody in your life, 25 plus, a woman, this is an incredibly important video for them to watch because I am going to unpack everything that I have learned in my journey to figure out that the forgetfulness, the inability to complete things, that was all actually ADD. I'm going to share everything that you need to know so you can figure out if this is something that you may be dealing with. Now, one major disclaimer is I'm not a doctor, and this video is not being meant to diagnose you. This video is being created so I can share really important life-changing information with you and with the people that you love that could help you if this is something that you're struggling with. So let's first talk about ADD. So ADD, in my research, what I've come to learn is that when ADD and ADHD became a phenomenon, I guess in the 70s is when they first started diagnosing kids with this, all of the experts studied boys. And so all of the signs that the experts were trained to look for related to boys. And when a boy has ADD, it presents very differently than when a little girl has ADD. Boys can be jumpy, they can be impulsive, they can be very physical, they move around a lot. Guess what girls do? They don't do any of that. When a girl has ADD, what happens is she tends to daydream. She tends to lose her train of thought. She tends to be hypercritical of herself. She tends to start to withdraw a little bit. And here's the piece that's super important. When a young girl and a young boy has ADD and it goes undiagnosed, what happens is the inability to focus, the self-criticism, the feelings of unworthiness start to increase. Because as school gets harder, guess what? It requires more brain power. It requires more focus. When you start to see yourself being unable to do the simple things everybody else seems to be able to do, you start to beat up on yourself more. So what happens for a lot of young girls that are failed to be diagnosed with ADD when they're struggling with it? They develop anxiety. They develop depression. They start turning all the struggle inward at themselves. That's exactly what happened to me. And a couple years ago, I read an article about what they were calling the lost generation of women. These are women who are 25 and older who were actually struggling with ADD when they were little, and nobody diagnosed them. And then they went on to develop anxiety. That's why they're the lost generation. Think about this. There's a huge spike of women that start to experience anxiety in their late teens and their early 20s. That's exactly what happened to me. Anxiety is easy to spot, so is depression. Experts start to treat anxiety and depression as the root cause of your problem, when what I learned the hard way, I didn't learn this until I was 47, is that the major issue I had been struggling with was undiagnosed and untreated ADD. Here's what I want you to consider. If you're 25 or older and you do struggle with some of these very common symptoms, you think you have brain fog, you can't get through your to-do list, you can't seem to focus on things, you have a hard time directing yourself, your cabinets are open, your keys are lost. I leave something on an airplane every time I fly, for crying out loud. I still struggle with this kind of stuff. Well, number one, you've got to go see a licensed professional. This is what I did. I read this article. I was like, oh my God, they're talking about me. Am I part of the lost generation of women? Am I part of the generation of women who had ADD that were never even diagnosed? Oh my gosh, I got to go see a doctor. I go see a doctor. It literally, one appointment, they're like, you're pretty textbook. Number two, if your doctor recommends that you take medication and you're comfortable with it, I certainly have had great success taking medication to address my ADD and find that my capacity to focus, my capacity to be able to stay on task and to remember has been expanded exponentially. Ironically, ADD is also genetic. So as soon as I realized this about myself, guess what I did with my daughters? And guess what? One of our two also has ADD, but she had been treated for anxiety because her ADD had never been diagnosed. So take a look at your girls as well. Third, and this is really, really important, there are strategies. Once you know you're dealing with ADD, there are strategies that you can use beyond medication that will help you coach yourself to stay focused and on task. And one of those strategies that is critical is exercise. Now, this is not me making this up. This comes from Dr. John Ratey. It comes from Ned Hallowell, the two leading experts on ADD in the world. Ned Hallowell wrote the book Driven to Distraction. Dr. John Ratey wrote the book called Spark. Both of them always prescribe exercise as part of the treatment plan for anybody that they are treating when it comes to ADD. And the reason why is because we know that when you exercise, it changes your brain chemistry. This isn't me, this is hard science. There is what Dr. John Ratey calls miracle grow for the brain that gets stimulated when you do just 20 minutes of cardio. It's life-changing stuff. Again, big disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. This video is not for the purposes of diagnosing you. I cannot do that. I'm not treating you with anything. I'm simply sharing information that changed my life. And here's the cool thing. You can be smart, you can be successful, particularly if you have ADD. It's just that once you know that that's what you're dealing with, you can get to the source of how to make yourself successful and live with this thing. What happened for me is suddenly the last 30 years of my life made a lot of sense because I realized, holy cow, I could see where the anxiety came from. I could see for how long I had been struggling to focus, to stay on task, to keep my train of thought. It didn't have to be that way. But thankfully, at the age of 47, I figured out the truth, and now I live very successfully and productively with ADD. And yes, occasionally, I do leave things on planes, and I do leave the faucet running, and I do leave the cabinet doors opening.